Mater's Tall Tales. This was a series of shorts that ran in between shows on the Disney Channel starting in 2008 and leading up to the release of Cars 2 in 2012. Pretty sure they kept airing reruns long past that, but yeah. It's actually one of two series of Cars shorts, the other being Tales from Radiator Springs, both of which fall under the banner of Cars Tunes, not a confusing name in the slightest. The premise of Mater's Tall Tales is that Mater has some outlandish story about his life that he's telling McQueen. About halfway through the story, he will suddenly inject McQueen into the narrative despite McQueen's insistence that he was never there and this never happened. So, naturally, this setup begs the question, who is telling the truth here and who is the backstabbing gaslighter? I'm gonna be real with y'all, half the reason I want to make this video is because these shorts have confused me and driven me nuts ever since I was a kid. One of these cars from the beloved Pixar franchise Cars is lying to my face and I need to know who. I suppose the truth might be somewhere in the middle, Mater's mostly telling the truth but probably fibbing about Lightning's appearances. But that's boring. I want the definitive truth. Mater or McQueen is lying fully and completely. I will have it no other way. I have my suspicions. It is called Mater's Tall Tales after all, but I want to give this its due diligence. And if there's one thing I've learned from Ace Attorney, is that if you want to prove something, you need evidence. If this tow truck wants to convince me that he was an astronaut, heavy metal artist, firefighter, and pro wrestler among other things, he better have some compelling proof. That brings us to how every single one of these shorts ends. Despite McQueen's claims that these tall tales are completely fabricated, each ending involves some character or object or ability from the story being showcased in the present day. In other words, Mater always presents evidence. But how good is this evidence really? Another thing I learned from Ace Attorney, no matter how decisive the evidence may seem or how airtight the testimony may be, nothing is beyond scrutiny, no witness is beyond fibbing, and no contradiction may go unrevealed. So we're gonna analyze every piece of evidence presented across these 11 shorts and determine whether they're worthless, inconclusive, or conclusive. Side note, there are only 11 of these shorts. As a kid it felt like there were 30, and looking into this I thought there'd be like 20 minimum. Oh well, less work for me. Alright, first up, Rescue Squad Mater. Starting with a double whammy here, Mater claims to be both a firefighter and a doctor, having rescued McQueen from a fire and then operating on him at the hospital. The evidence presented is the appearance of Mater's GTO, his assistant from the hospital who refers to him as Doctor in the present day. Well, for starters, this witness failed to corroborate anything involving the firefighter section of the narrative, so we can just completely throw that out. More importantly though, simply referring to Mater as Doctor does not actually confirm anything for us. It would certainly lead us to believe that Mater was a doctor at some point, but it's nothing substantial. Not a completely worthless testimony, but certainly inconclusive. Next up, Mater the Greater. Mater claims to have been a death-defying daredevil. When he injects McQueen into the narrative, he claims that McQueen failed to jump Carburetor Canyon. Failing a jump like that would have almost certainly killed McQueen, so I'm inclined to immediately throw this claim out since we can clearly see McQueen is alive and well. However, immediately after this, Mater's stunt crew from the story arrive, cleaning up some cans and following Mater off-screen. Similar to the GTO, these apparent witnesses don't actually contribute any meaningful testimony. Their existence could theoretically suggest anything. Maybe they're just the Radiator Springs cleanup crew, maybe they work for Mater in some capacity other than daredeviling, maybe they're just random people who happen to stroll by and clean up some cans at this convenient moment. Unfortunately, without the ability to cross-examine these witnesses, we don't have much else to go on other than to say that this evidence is, once again, inconclusive. Next we have El Materdor. Mater is a bulldozer fighting Matador in Spain. Apparently Lightning is too, despite his red paint job. This one ends with Lightning being chased off by the local bulldozers. They were already near at the start of the short, so that's completely meaningless. This is followed by Mia and Tia, two characters that pretty much always appear in these shorts, arriving and calling Mater Senor Mater. Okay, so first of all, this is the first time where McQueen has not been present for the presentation of the evidence since he was chased off by the bulldozers a second ago. Considering the questionability of the past two stories, I think it's safe to say that Mater is potentially an unreliable narrator. So I'm inclined to doubt any events in the short where McQueen is not explicitly confirming their validity. Therefore, Mia and Tia's arrival here is suspect at best. Secondly, all that calling Mater Senor Mater confirms for us is that A, these two girls know Mater's name, which makes sense, it's written across his car door, and B, they refer to him as Senor likely just because they speak Spanish. It's not like anything in the story presented Senor Mater as Mater's Matador title. We know his title to be El Matador. In fact, I find it odd that in the presence of a presumed famous Matador, that they wouldn't call him by his official title. Therefore, I posit that this evidence is contradictory. If Mater was truly once El Matador as he claims, these two girls from the narrative would have referred to him as such first and foremost. The El Matador story is completely unfounded and lacks even the slightest shred of conclusive evidence. On to Tokyo Mater. Mater claims to have won a race in Tokyo as a modified Drift King with Lightning Dragon McQueen's help. This is the only short where literally no evidence is presented. It ends with Guido putting wooden modifications on Mater as he skids across the road. Do I even need to tell you that this proves nothing? Completely and utterly worthless. Moving on. Unidentified flying Mater. Mater meets a UFO and rescues it from Area 51. Lightning is just kinda shoehorned in at the end here. The evidence presented is that Mater maintains the ability to fly, a skill presumably taught to him by the UFO. However, once again, McQueen is not actually there for the presentation of the evidence. He leaves right before as he's grossed out by Mater's noises. But we do have a different witness, Fillmore. He's the green van. So, I don't know if this witness is particularly reliable. Earlier in this same short, we see him push aside his drink as Mater flies by, so I get the sense he's not all there. Again, without the ability to cross-examine, we're sort of left out to dry. If I could confidently say that this flight did happen, I would have to consider the evidence more closely, but without a strong witness, I will have to say it's inconclusive. Alright, on to Monster Truck Mater. Mater becomes a pro wrestler called the Tormentor, with McQueen as his tag team partner towards the end, referred to as Frightening McMean. This evidence is actually pretty damn conclusive. A huge Tormentor fan arrives on the scene, decked out in merch and a Tormentor-themed paint job, and asks for Mater's autograph. Afterwards, Lightning even seems to concede to the truth of the story. Or at least, in a desperate bid for momentary glory, tries to convince the fans to take Frightening McMean's autograph. It is a bit suspicious that the fan doesn't recognize Frightening McMean if he was such a big Tormentor fan, but they only seem to tag team for one match, so I can let that slide. I don't think there's really any other way to look at this. We have to consider this conclusive evidence that Monster Truck Mater is a plausible story. Next up, Heavy Metal Mater. Mater becomes a heavy metal rock star with McQueen in tow. The evidence here is a bit strange. One of the props from Mater's show, a giant balloon depicting Mater as a vampire, floats into Radiator Springs in full view of everybody. So this seems conclusive at first glance, and it's certainly a major piece of evidence we can't ignore. However, how do we truly know for a fact that this balloon depicts Heavy Metal Mater as seen in his story? All this depicts is Mater as a vampire. This could have been made for some kind of Halloween party, or monster movie, or promotional material for the film Cars 2, because yes, there is a brief vampire Mater appearance there. In fact, I think it's worth questioning how and why this balloon appeared in Radiator Springs when it did. Mater even seems to preemptively predict the balloon's appearance, like he knew it was gonna be there. Could Mater have set up this balloon beforehand in order to prove his story that he knew he'd be telling McQueen tonight because he knew there'd be a karaoke party that would naturally set up the telling of this story? Think about it, how else could this balloon be here? If it was only ever used for Mater's concerts, there's no reason for it to be blown up and floating out in the open. Even if it escaped the venue Mater was performing in, it would certainly lose air long before it had any opportunity to conveniently float in at the telling of this story. There are only two real possibilities. Either this balloon comes from something other than Mater's heavy metal concert that would explain its presence, or Mater set it up beforehand because he is an expert gaslighter and we shouldn't trust him. Now of course, if Mater did set it up beforehand, there is still a possibility that the heavy metal story is true and that Mater simply wanted to prove it to McQueen. But Mater's desire to prove the story true is a given. It cannot prove the actual validity of the tale. And I think I've shed enough doubt on this whole scenario to comfortably call this evidence inconclusive. Alright, moving on to Moon Mater. This one's pretty cut and dry. Mater and McQueen are astronauts. At the end, the rocket from Mater's story arrives claiming Houston has another problem that they need Mater's help with. The wording here is the real nail in the coffin. Houston has another problem, implying Mater's involvement in a previous problem that we have no real reason to believe isn't depicted in the story Mater was telling. Again, if I could cross-examine these animated anthropomorphic vehicles, I would love to question Roger here about this other incident to see if it truly lines up with Mater's story, but without the means to do so, I have to take this testimony as conclusive evidence that Moon Mater is in fact plausible. In Mater Private Eye, Mater is a detective and Lightning is somehow a police lieutenant? Okay, in most of these stories, it's pretty safe to assume that Lightning gets roped into these situations because of Mater, right? He never really takes on a role that we can't reasonably assume Mater got him into. Except here, I do not believe for a second that Lightning was ever a lieutenant or that Mater as a private eye could have possibly forced him into that role. Couple that with the evidence here just being the singer and band from the Copacabana showing up, something that proves nothing about Mater's story other than the Copacabana being a real place in this universe, and I think we can pretty comfortably call this whole narrative completely bogus. Air Mater ends up being the same exact situation as Moon Mater. This time Mater is a stunt plane along with McQueen, and at the end his stunt team picks him up to do another show. Admittedly, the testimony here isn't as clear as Rogers was. They say they're down to play and that they need Mater, but they never state that there was a previous time when they needed Mater. But the implications speak for themselves. What other possible reason could they have to consider Mater a tow truck, as a candidate for this if he hadn't proven himself in the past as his story suggests. Not to mention how deftly he executes the trick of hooking onto the planes as they pass by. I have no real justification for not considering this evidence to be conclusive. And finally, our last short, Time Travel Mater. We're gonna be here a while. In this short, Mater time travels to the founding of Radiator Springs. Upon realizing that history isn't working out quite right, he goes to the future to enlist McQueen's help. Specifically, he travels to the time when Mater is telling this story to McQueen. The story effectively breaks into the framing device, something usually reserved for the end of the short, but now it's happening right in the middle. Thus, this is our first piece of evidence. Yeah, there are two for this one. When the story wraps up, McQueen proceeds to deny this event ever happening, despite the fact that we all saw it happen within the framing device of the series, and have no reason to believe it to be false since McQueen was obviously there witnessing the event as we saw it. Additionally, throughout the rest of Mater's time travel story, McQueen is more in character than he usually is for these stories, suggesting that this is the McQueen we're used to from the framing device. So I find it hard to believe that this is Mater's characterization of McQueen that we've seen in the past. Everything suggests it's the real McQueen. But despite that, McQueen claims the story is false. As always. So I suppose nothing's truly changed. It's still just Mater's word against McQueen's. There's just a major contradiction we haven't resolved yet. Well, let's address the other piece of evidence. At the end, Lizzie thanks McQueen for introducing her to Stanley, something McQueen did while in the past with Mater. Now, much like Fillmore, I wouldn't exactly call Lizzie a reliable witness, but it can't be coincidence that she recalls the event exactly as Mater's tale presented it. Honestly, this alone is enough to make a sound argument for the conclusiveness of this evidence, but coupled with the previous incident where we all saw Mater take McQueen to the past in real time, I think we have to consider this the most definitive evidence we've seen thus far. And it sort of leads me to question pretty much everything about this series of shorts. Up to this point, I've been assuming that everything that occurs in the framing device where Mater and McQueen are present is reality. There have been a couple questionable moments, like Mia and Tia in El Materdor, or Mater flying an unidentified flying Mater, but now with this bonkers moment in Time Travel Mater, I'm starting to think either Mater's stories have completely and utterly destroyed the concept of reality, and we can't truly believe anything that's happening is canon, or the much more logical conclusion, Mater's telling the truth, and McQueen is lying. That would explain every discrepancy so far. Of course, through evidence analysis, we've already proven several stories to be plausible, but they've all been through witness testimony we couldn't cross-examine, so there was always a shred of doubt. And between Lieutenant McQueen, the girls not calling Mater El Matador, and the complete failure to exhibit any Tokyo drifting skills, there are plenty of grounds to prove several stories completely false. And I will fully admit, I went into this investigation determined to prove this tow truck guilty. I wanted to see this beloved children's character's reputation burn. But perhaps I misjudged him. After all, at the start of every short, he confidently claims, "If I'm lying, I'm crying." And he does not shed a single tear across the entirety of Mater's tall tales. Of course, I've been dealing in absolutes. We can easily say that some stories are true and some aren't. But even that explanation leaves one very important question. Why would Lightning McQueen lie? What's the motive? How does he stand to benefit from disregarding Mater's stories as falsehoods, especially when many of them paint him in a heroic light? Perhaps he simply forgot that these events happened. Or more dramatically, perhaps he specifically chooses to repress these memories considering the immense physical trauma he undergoes in most of them. Or maybe he's embarrassed by the stories. Or maybe he wants his friend to come across as foolish to make himself look better. Or maybe, just maybe, he wants us, the audience, to obsessively and constantly question every story so that years later we still aren't sure whether or not the comic relief from the beloved Pixar franchise Cars is or is not a pathological liar. Or, you know, Mater's stories are mostly true, but he fibs the parts with lightning in them because it's funny. Yeah, that's probably it. So, this was different, huh? Yeah, I don't know, something about the idea of overanalyzing these Cars shorts was very amusing to me, and I thought it'd be fun. So I hope you found it fun too. I don't expect to go full Ace Attorney on any other video topics like this. Maybe there's a Steven Universe idea that warrants it, but we'll get there when we get there. In any case, thanks for watching. Sorry the channel's been a bit quiet. I spent most of February working on my upcoming March Caprice project, which should be premiering on this channel towards the end of March, so look forward to that. What's March Caprice, you may ask? Well, it's an online event where all sorts of different creators release content surrounding the Kingdom Hearts series. It's really cool. Check out more info on their website, link in the description. This will be my second year as part of the event, and I'm very excited to show you all what I've been cooking back here. As always, a like, comment, and subscribe are appreciated, especially if you don't want to miss my March Caprice thing. See y'all then.